Okay, tired? A little bit tired? You've been getting a lot of work done, so that's great. Today we're just going to go over the Iowa Young Writers Workshop personal statement. So I don't know how many of you plan on applying to the Iowa Young Writers Workshop. It's a prestigious program for all kinds of writing, creative writing, poetry. Sorry, I have to keep stepping in front here too. This is just a brief description of the program. So it's run through, it's kind of the student version of the Iowa Writers Program, which is a pretty famous MFA program that a lot of famous writers have gone to. Maybe the most famous of them is, well, it's okay anyway. But there's there's an online version and there's a residential version. So if you're thinking about applying to this, you should think about whether or not you want to do the in-person or the online. The difference is that the online version is asynchronous, means you kind of do it on your own time. You know, you're given weekly assignments that you have to complete. You're still working with writers from the program, but you're doing it on your own at a kind of slower pace. The 2-week program is a more immersive, on campus, much faster pace. Of course, the benefit is you're actually meeting with and talking with people in person. The kinds of writing that you can apply for: fiction writing, poetry writing, or creative writing, which includes kind of personal essay, fiction, poetry. And then you can also do TV writing and playwriting. So if anyone's interested in writing scripts, this is also a program that could be beneficial to you. So what you do is you take a individual core course, you have some writing assignments every week, you have workshops, and you're working with a series of writers to help you improve your craft as a writer. There's also some readings that they'll give you from, oh, I'm not sure what happened here. Is this me or? There we go.
You're good now.
So I'll skip over there's the difference between the summer course and the residential course. That's not super important, but the things you need to have to apply to this is you need the personal statement, the statement of purpose, which we're going to go over today, and then you also need a writing sample. The writing sample has to, well, it can be any length really, but no longer than 10 pages. I don't know if you're doing something, a work of fiction that's longer than 10 pages, you can just do a 10-page segment of it. You can do a couple of short stories, you can do a series of poems. If you're thinking about applying to this is also something that we could work on as part of our workshop today. If anybody wants to talk to me about a potential submission, we could be working on that together. You also need a recommendation letter, probably from an English teacher would be the best person who could recommend you. And then of course there's the online application, which has a couple of other things you need to fill out. But here's the question of the personal statement. It's asking you, okay, Iowa Young Writers Studio, tell us why you want to participate in the studio and what you hope to accomplish here. Okay, you may want to discuss your writing sample or talk about writers or works that you admire. So first thing, this is a kind of general point that will be important for anything that you're applying to. Just remember, especially when you get to your college applications, just remember that to read the question carefully and make sure that your work is really answering the question that is being asked, right? It doesn't help if you have an interesting statement or piece of work, but doesn't really address the questions that they're asking you to address. So you have to make a case for why you want to be part of this program, and in order to do that, you sort of need to understand what the program is about, right? You need to understand its methodologies, you need to understand what it's offering in order for you to make a case for why you would be a good person to participate. And secondly, what do you hope to accomplish here? They're asking you for a kind of, you know, a curriculum of your own for what you hope to work on, right? So I have here one sample one sample. It's a little bit short. I asked Betty, were you able to send this out to everyone? Does everyone have a copy of this? Maybe it was sent. Okay, so you can just look at it on your own rather than trying to read it off of this. But it's 1 to 2 pages long, and I'm just going to go through it with us. Maybe we could think about what makes this successful. So you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen more and speak less. So we have a quotation that opens up the piece, kind of somewhat provocative quotation that's talking about the relationship between listening and speaking, between absorbing information and giving one's own thoughts or opinion. So my Chinese culture inculcated 3 values: harmony, hierarchy, and humility. But when I came to the United States for high school, these values, which had anchored my existence, suddenly became unmoored. My classes were like a parliament of birds. Far from the silent, dutiful atmosphere of listening to which I had been accustomed, my classes introduced me to a world in which students spoke more than listened, so that would be kind of the opposite of the quotation we begin with, right? In which they bragged more than deferred. So that's the opposite of humility, one of the three values. Even more startling, my classmates were willing to challenge the teacher's authority, pushing back against readings they did not accept. Adrift in a sea of unfamiliar social conventions, I yearned for a stable port. Afraid to ask questions aloud, I took refuge in the written word. Okay, so what do you think that this opening paragraph is accomplishing? Does anyone want to take a stab at this? You're looking at it hopefully on your computers, or you've heard me read it out loud. What do you think the value of this opening paragraph is as an application statement? What do you think it's trying to accomplish? Does anyone want to take a stab at that? Or what's one thing you notice about this that we might put our finger on that seems valuable, that seems good?
It's answering why, and then like how he had the passion for writing.
Okay, so exactly. So this is giving us an introduction to the writers, whoever this writer is, their reason for writing. And you might think about that. Why do you want to go to the writer's workshop? Anyone would want to go ostensibly because they want to improve their craft of writing. So trying to suggest why you're a writer in the first place, where your interest in writing comes from, is very helpful. Now this is a good idea to get in mind for any kind of application that you're going to write. So for example, when you're going to college and they're going to ask you a why major question, you're going to get there down the road. But thinking about why you're interested in the thing that you're interested in. Like what's the origin of your passion for the thing that you want to study is a good strategy to employ at the beginning of the piece. So we understand what this person's relationship to writing is, right? They've come into a new cultural environment, the world seems different, and writing therefore is a kind of refuge, right? It's an escape from a world that they don't fully feel as if they understand, okay? So now we immediately understand not what this writer is writing, but why they're writing. Okay, at first I found myself in a liminal space, speaking and dreaming and writing in Chinese. Lost in the gulf between divergent cultural norms, so that means not sure where I fit in this cultural experience. I started to read, and in book after book, I found shared experiences that offered hope. Okay, so now the writer here is turning to their experience of literature, right? What is it that reading has offered this person? And this is something, by the way, if we look back at the prompt, says you can talk about your writing, you can talk about the books that have been inspired, or that have inspired you. So Ana Menendez's In Cuba, I Was a German Shepherd reflected the tension between Cuban and American cultures. Menendez had spent her life, as I was doing, traversing physical, cultural, and metaphysical landscapes. So a connection to a book that she has read. In Joy Luck Club, Amy Tan, a daughter of Chinese immigrants, explored the sense of bereavement that accompanied cultural translocation. So the same thing that this student is feeling. In other words, they're identifying with the texts that they're reading. To me, the conflict between mothers and daughters depicted in the book embodied the uneasy relationship between Chinese culture, where statements often contain dual meanings, surface and implied, and American culture, where messages generally assert themselves more directly. So again, what are the texts that this student has read, and what is the importance of them? Through texts such as these, I found answers, and before long, my voice found its shape on the page. In Forgotten Times, so this is one of the pieces that they've obviously submitted as a writing sample, I explored how cultural perspectives rewrite the meaning of seemingly objective events. In other words, here's something that seems objective, two people meeting, but if you see it from different cultural perspectives, it means something different, right? So we're getting an insight into the logic behind the pieces that she submitted for her application. In Speak Up and Silent Love, I examined divergent cultural attitudes towards respect and love. Writing was a method to unwind the problems of life, to untangle the skein of cultural confusion that had ensnared me. So here you'll see there is a little metaphor happening here, that life is a kind of ball of yarn that's all wound up, and writing is a way of untangling that in order to make sense of the world. So again, we get in this paragraph very nicely a description of, first of why they're writing, how the things that they have read provide a model for a certain kind of writing, and then a description of what these pieces are trying to do. So you can see we're really just going through the how and why of the early parts of the essay prompt. Now the last thing that the prompt asks us is, what do you want to do at the Iowa Writer Studio? And now we're getting that explanation here, which is, at Iowa Writer Studios, I will engage in seminar workshops that will allow me to work with peers from diverse backgrounds who are also navigating the process of understanding themselves through reading and writing. So this is not a technical question, right? It's not saying I want to learn how to write better poems, right? It's to talk about writing from a cultural perspective, right? Because that's the dominant theme that's running through this writer's piece. What matters to them is how writing engages with culture, not how it engages necessarily with craft. I'm eager to merge their horizons with my own to further the process of understanding myself, others, and the intersection of various cultures. I see myself walking with my peers down Literary Walk. So this is nice just to show that you know the location of the place, that you have some sense of its details. Assessing the styles, themes, and genres that we gravitate towards, confronting how cultural backgrounds influence both our personal voices and literary interpretations. So in other words, I want to be a good collaborative member of this community. I don't want to be there just for myself. I want to engage with other people. I want to learn from other people. I want to share experiences with other people. But now we're going to get slightly more technical. In seminars, I will explore how to evoke culturally specific forms of thinking. Again, that's a very specific thing that this person wants to learn. Like, in other words, how can I translate one specific cultural attitude, a way of seeing the world, how can I put that onto the page in a way that someone who's not from that culture will understand? I imagine taking up the problem how to prevent the explanatory narrative voice from subduing the voice of the characters in exploring cultural divergences, or the problem of how to show a character's inner struggle without relying on dialogue or simple cognitive reportage. So this is a much more technical aspect. In other words, how do I depict what people are thinking in a story, right? Like, you could have an objective narrator who just comes in and says, Toby was sitting in the back of the room. Toby was enthralled by this presentation that was happening, right? But that might just overpower the story. So how can we show what Toby's thinking or feeling without just implying this third-person omniscient narrator, right? Without just, what are the techniques that make that kind of move possible? That's a technical question of writing, right? How do I create tension? How do I create drama? How do I more accurately represent what people talk like or think like, right? These are technical questions that you might want to learn if you went to a writing program. So if you want to apply to this, think about what are the strengths you have as a writer? What are the things you know you do well? Is it creating mood? Is it creating character? Is it creating scene? And what are the things that you still want to work on as a writer? What are the things that you still want to benefit from? Okay, I will also incorporate my perspective from a cross-cultural standpoint with the vitality of perspectives that other participants bring. Okay, we don't have to go through this because I already kind of did, but I broke it down. You can see that this thing just breaks down into 3 parts. Here's, my reason for turning to writing. Here's my engagement with other texts and how they've influenced me, and here's what I want to learn. So you can see this very nicely maps onto what the question is asking you. And that's the first step to doing any application essay. Is don't worry about being creative in answering it. Worry about answering it effectively. What is it asking me? Get my answer on the page as clearly and concisely as you can. Then we can think about how to elevate the language through metaphor, through structural interest. Okay? Does everyone sort of understand this sort of basic idea that we're going through here? Okay, that's pretty much all that I have to go over with this particular piece. Does anyone have any questions or anything they want to ask me about Iowa Writer Studio or about application essays in general?
Does writing sample for this have to be creative?
Does it have to be?
Creative writing.
Yes, so it should be whatever you're applying for, it should be an example of that kind of writing. So if you're applying for fiction, you should send fiction. If you're applying for poetry, you should send poetry. I mean, I guess you could technically send something other than that, but in my experience, successful essays or successful applications usually have to demonstrate some ability in the area that they're applying for.
Okay.
I think it just makes the most sense. All right. Any other questions? All right, everybody, if you think of a question later on, I'm just, as always, sitting out there editing, working with you. Feel free to stop by and ask me any questions that you have. Good luck today. Make sure you get your writing done, and I look forward to talking to some of you soon. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you.